we could both be awkward here.
That is my middle name. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
What is your middle name?
John. John. So,
John.
so my full name. So I didn't realize my full name is Zachary John, but it's Zachary spelled Zachery. And I didn't realize that until I was about 18 years old, and I'd always spelt it Ary. And then went to get like I can't remember what I was doing at the bank. Had to take my birth certificate in, and they said your names don't match with your birth certificate. And I was like, been spelling my name wrong for 18 years. So yeah, so that was a bit of a shock.
That's wild. Spelling my name wrong for 18 years. I always think about my mom, like in this like kind of like for a woman of her age, a radical act that she did when I was a child. She was like, I think I was, Ellen is such a, I don't know, there weren't a lot of people in the early 1980s named Ellen. I'll just leave it at that. And so, I had a lot of questions about my name, and she was like, oh, well, you could change the spelling of your name. Like if you wanted to do Ellyn or something, like you could change the spelling of your name. And I always just thought like, wow, for a fairly like conservative person to give me that power to be like, oh, you could just change your name. I always thought that was a radical act. But let's dive in. Zac, we both 2026 is a big year for us. Year of the horse. We're off to the races. We both just launched new consultancies.
Yeah.
Tell me about Rocket.
Yeah. Well, year of the horse, but hopefully not too many hurdles. We'll avoid them. But yeah, so I launched Rocket EX, which I'm very, very excited about. It's something I've been mulling over and thinking about for years, and kind of finally decided now's the right time. Now I'm ready for it as well, which I think is a big part of the decision. But throughout my career, I've kind of just thought, how we experience work is huge. It dictates not just how we feel about ourselves, but the work that we can do. And internal comms, employee experience, culture, they're all intertwined. And working with yourself back in our great days and many other places, I was kind of like, right, I've got so much insight into what works and what doesn't. How can I share this? How can I help other people? And not just create experiences at work that people look forward to, but businesses that are more successful, because ultimately that's what we want to pursue as well. But yeah, it's something very, very excited about. Rocket, if it's not too lame to say, I actually have a tattoo of a rocket, and it's something that I was kind of like, what can I name my business? What's something about me that stands out? And I looked at my arm and I was like, there's the name. Why not? Let's go for it. So if you ever see me in short sleeve t-shirt, then you'll see why. But yeah, that's where it came from. But tell me about your venture, because it is very, very exciting.
Yeah. Well, from our work together, when I was at my last company at Cisco, and when you were at the agency that you were previously at, we had a very big employee focus at Cisco. It was very people-centered. I drew a lot of inspiration from that time, and that work that we did at the company really encouraged me to keep digging as both a practitioner and as a human. And what that means is a couple of years ago, I found a really interesting program, academic program in the United States at Dominican University called, it was a master's in trauma-informed leadership. And I took the time getting that master's degree, and really thought about applying everything I was learning from trauma-informed principles, which we can dig into at a different point, applying them not just to leadership, but also looking at my practice as an employee communications professional to say, what would it look like to do this work through this lens? And so coming into this year, I had the opportunity to step into this new adventure. And so I created Equilibrious Communications. Equilibrious is a play on equilibrium, which is kind of the ideal state that a human wants to be in. And so I created Equilibrious Communications that to focus on a trauma-informed approach to employee communications. So just recently, I figured out a really snappy way to call this work is internal calms. And so we're going to bring calm to internal comms, and it's called internal calms.
Love,
So it's pretty exciting.
amazing, amazing, and the different elements of trauma informed, because me and you have spoken about it, and I found it fascinating. It's opened my eyes to so much more. But I mean, we're going through so much as a society at the moment, and this feels, the trauma informed lens feels like such an important thing right now that we can all kind of learn from. Would you agree? Is there another driver behind it?
No, I mean, I do. Yeah, I do agree. I think that what we're seeing right now within society is something that researchers call polycrisis, and it's really something that people first began to notice around the pandemic, where you started to have one global crisis with the pandemic, and then we had layered on climate change, and then we had layered on um, you know economic issues, war, all of these other things that we've seen in the last 6 years, right? We're coming up almost on 6 years to the date since we went into lockdown. And so looking at this world where it's no longer kind of you have a 2008 economic crisis, but then we bounce back and things were you know mostly calm for 11 years. No, this is our new normal is that there's just one thing after the other. And I really, from what I can see through research and just kind of following along with the state of the world, this doesn't seem to be something that's going to be going away anytime soon. And
Mm,
so a trauma informed approach recognizes that significant portions of your population have been exposed to some kind of traumatic event in their life. And it might be what they call capital T trauma or what they call little t trauma. But, everything from the death of a loved one to violence to even something like a divorce or a layoff can be a traumatic event. And a trauma informed approach recognizes that and addresses what the aftermath of that is like for your mind and your body. And so really this is understanding that these things that we've experienced collectively and will continue to experience are going to rewire the way that we process and we receive information. And it's a way of looking at your existing strategies and your existing approaches to say, okay, how can we reduce the urgency, or how can we reduce kind of introducing something that would leave people feeling anxious or uncertain? How can we build conditions for safety and for trust within our strategies? And so that's what the framework that I'm advocating supports. So,
love it, love it. It's
yeah.
so important for kind of all of us to take that approach. I remember reading something a while ago, and I'm not going to throw stats out there because that's how the things get misconstrued. But your brain can only hold so much information, and the example that I read quite a while ago was, if you're thinking about the shopping list that you need to do after work, if you're thinking about getting the kids to school on time, if you're thinking about what you heard on the news this morning about the war or anything like that, and then you get to work and you're being told that you need to remember this and then do that. We can't hold all this information in. So how do we make it more accessible for people? How do we recognize that people don't leave the rest of the world at the door when they come in or open the laptop? There are other things going on as well, and we need to recognize that in the experiences and the communication that we deliver. I mean, I think.
And it has implications across, like, for all of EX, I think. And that's where, to some of the work that a that a company might be doing with their principles or values or things like that, as you're introducing all of these new, um, it's not just about having someone, follow along with your strategy for the quarter, right? And keeping up with your KPIs. If you're, it's that you're asking them to do that, and then you're asking them to sign up and be part of your new, values rollout, right? Where you're giving new values or guiding principles for your teams, and then you're introducing your AI transformation, and then, oh, by the way, we've got a new intranet and we're have a naming contest for it, and like all of these things that are just continually going.
Yeah.
And yeah, the human brain can only hold so many things at once, and so it's a I hesitate to say a kinder and gentler way of doing things, because business doesn't often respond well to words like that, but it really is that, and it's, I think, what's necessary.
Mhm.
um but I wanted to talk too about, like, you and I were just talking about something that, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but that you just put together, and it's based, and I am so excited on it about it, because it's based on work that I got to see you do in real time. The work that you and I did together specifically was always around employee listening. And we worked together for several years on an annual listening program. And you have put together something that is really, really cool. And so, do you want to talk about that?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. Some of the most, you know, not just the proudest, but most the work that I enjoyed the most was you and the team on listening, because we can all be experts in what we do, but everywhere is different, and our gut instinct isn't always the best judge of what's right and what's wrong. And listening is the only way that we can understand what people want and need from their experience and their internal comms at work. And I think that's why the work that we did previously was so impactful, because we went out to everyone, we went out to people and said what works, what doesn't, what do you need from this, and shaped communication so that it actually appealed to people, that it was about the topics that they wanted to know about. It was in the formats and the channels that were most preferable to them. And what I've decided to do is to distill all of that knowledge, all of that information into a toolkit, into a framework that gives someone the questions to ask in a survey, because surveys are great at getting data in large quantity, but they never really tell you. They tell you what's going on. They don't really tell you why. And then there's focus groups. How do you set them up? Framework and guidance on what works, what doesn't, tools you can use to support focus groups, the questions to ask, and how to ask those open-ended questions that get you to the context and the root cause of what's going on. And then actually, what do you do with all that insight? Because it's great to ask the questions, it's great to have the data, but when you look at all these numbers and all these answers, you can feel quite overwhelmed. So how do we analyze that in a way that doesn't just tell us what's going on, but why, and helps us see what we can do about it? These are the actions that we could take to solve the challenges, or build on the opportunities that we're hearing. And then I think the final piece, which took me the longest, which was quite enjoyable as well, is how do we take all these ideas that we've got and prioritize them? How do we look at the
Mm.
ones that we're going to
Hmm.
do right now, the ones that we'll keep an eye on and come back to, and the ones actually we can't really do anything about because it's A, either out of our control, or B, it just isn't realistic for us to do. And then how do we turn that into an action plan? Because you can look at these actions and you can think, God, this feels massive. How do I even start? But if you break it down into those little steps, how can we just move one step forward today? How do we move another step forward tomorrow? It might be bringing leaders on board. It might be engaging a team like IT if it's around an intranet, for example. But putting all of that into a framework that's accessible, that anyone, whether you're new into a role or whether you've been in the business for years, and in the industry for years, you can pick up, and it's just a bit of a refresh, just to spark some new ideas and say, I've not asked that question before, I've not thought about it in that context, or actually been so head down and focused in just doing the day job. How do I make sure that what I'm doing is the best that it can be? So yeah, so huge fan of listening, huge belief in evidence over assumptions, and making sure that we're just actually doing something worthwhile. And my little helper, my little assistant here, he's a little help. Yes, buddy. It's cool. Bigfoot family. So yeah, so juggling listening with being a parent. I mean, he doesn't listen, so maybe there's next toolkit is on child.
That's a different toolkit for a different day. I wanted to ask, like, so I've worked at companies where, like Cisco, where we had every possible resource you could imagine as an internal communications team, and it was a gorgeous experience. And I've also worked at companies where I was almost building the function entirely from scratch, right? And didn't have anything. And so for and a team of one, right? And so for the team of one, folks that might be listening, like, it sounds like this resource can be a great starting place for them to look at and to start to think about how they might put together a listening program. How do you how have you seen in your experience, um, this really making a difference for organizations, for someone who's looking to get, maybe their executives are a little bit hesitant, right, to do something like this? It's a little, daunting. What's the difference that something like employee listening can make?
I mean, the last agency was at when I worked with you, one of our other clients had an award for best ongoing commitment to internal communications because of the partnership we did through listening. It was a UK sporting body, and they came to us because they said, actually, our communication isn't at the standard that we want it to be. We know we do things that are good, but we don't know actually what's landing. We don't know how to bring people together. And listening was really what helped us uncover that people were missing the purpose of why they come to work, why they worked at this organization. They knew what the strategy was, they knew what the sustainability target was. But actually, they were missing the spark that made that company special, and that's what internal comms can bring to life. So that was a big angle. Another element we found was that actually, I don't know where to go for information. We've got all these great channels, and everyone's putting loads of effort in, but we're just spreading everything everywhere, and nothing's really sticking. So where do I go for what I need to know? And the final piece was they recognized there was a need for an intranet, but where did they even start with an intranet? Because they didn't know what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through listening, through uncovering, from speaking to people out on the road, to those in the office, up to the CEO, to say, actually, what's working, what isn't, what do you need from this to be your best, to feel your best, to do your best. And that's what helped inform that strategy. And we guided them. We came back 12 months later. We did some more listening after they'd done a huge amount of work. And we found that the organizational pride, just from changing their storytelling approach, just from changing the content that they were focusing on, had increased by 50%, which is massive. If you think about the pride
Whoa.
of the organization, that actually this is why I work here. That's a huge engagement driver. We found that 80% of people were using that intranet that they built based on what they heard on a daily basis. That's nearly almost everyone in the business was using that intranet, which was brilliant. And the feedback we had from across people, the feedback that I'm trying to remember the direct quotes, but Morgan is brilliant is one of the pieces I remember. This is the best it's ever been. This is far better than anyone else I've ever worked, and that's just from listening. So
Yeah.
whilst we can say we don't have the time, actually, is it worthwhile investing? It absolutely is. Comms shapes our culture, and our culture shapes our comms. And if we're not going to invest in it, we're just leaving it to the wild. It can do what it wants. Whereas if you design it, you can create the behaviors, you can create the culture and experience that moves your business forward. And that all starts with listening, which is
Yeah.
why it's very important, and why I'm passionate about it as well.
I think that it's, it for me, looking at this from a trauma informed perspective, there really isn't a strategy that I would be comfortable advocating for from a trauma informed perspective that doesn't involve listening. And there's a couple of areas where it really intersects really nicely with a trauma informed framework. And so there's within my framework that I've created for trauma informed communications, there's 6 principles. One of them is around trustworthiness,
Mm.
and one of them is also around collaboration and empowerment. So with trustworthiness, it's this notion of coming back to the employee and saying, you spoke, we heard you, here's what we've done with this information, here's what we've changed, right? And that builds that trust, which is so important right now when we're seeing overall kind of erosions of trust, society wide. Having something that can, for the most part, if you act on what your employees are telling you, it will increase the trust that they have, right? It's not like a money back guarantee, but like it for the most part, it will, right? And so that's a huge aspect. The ability within collaboration is about both collaborating with your peers, but also expressing that two-way voice and allowing that input from the employees to shape how business gets done, and to shape and influence the culture in which you do it. And so that's another element of a trauma informed approach. And then this third principle of empowerment is really just saying to employees, here's what you can do about it. So knowing that if an employee has a concern, has something that they want to share, does want to see something different about the way that things are done, that there is an action that they can take, that they do have some agency to take. And I think there's, like I mentioned, there's just no way to really truly design an approach and a strategy from a trauma informed perspective that doesn't dial into this listening aspect. I wanted to ask maybe just a couple more questions, because I could talk about just this single topic all day long with you. You mentioned the importance of an open-ended question. Can you give an example of your favorite one of your favorite maybe open-ended questions that you like to ask, or the difference between an open-ended question and maybe a yes no kind of
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, we could talk about it from comms. One of my favorite experiences within a focus group, we were talking about culture, and it was part of a comms audit, because as I say, comms has to reflect our culture has to reflect our comms, and it was with a visual effects company. They worked on Marvel films, they worked on Harry Potter. I was geeking out. I was loving it. But culture is really hard to talk about, especially if you're not used to it. If you said, "Tell me about your culture," you might be a bit. Oh. And what I did was found 4 or 5 of the movies that they worked on, and found kind of the artwork for the film. And I said, if the culture here was a film, which film would it be? And a few people look at it, and there was what was there? There was Mary Poppins. People were saying, actually, someone is always pulling magic out of their bag. The work we
Mm.
do is incredible, and it's just finding these little analogies to start the story. And people use Top Gun. We're mavericks. We're leading the way. We're always trying to do things the best. And equally, there are the opposite sides of the coin as well that people draw on. But it's fascinating to watch people's minds work, to say, actually, they think about the film, they find those analogies, those metaphors, and it just starts a conversation. And that's exactly what we're looking for. If you say, "Do you like comms?" people go, "No." That's the conversation over with.
Right.
But if someone says, they're always pulling stuff out of the bag, well, tell me more. Have you got an example of that? And someone might say, "I was working really late. We were working on this project, and someone came over and were like, 'Let's do this and let's work together.' And we got it done and we smashed it." And you're like, "Great, there's a story that comes out that explains more about why a person feels a certain way, rather than just saying, no, I don't like it, or yeah, it's fine. And that was one of my favorite experiences, kind of asking that question, and it means so much more, and you can do so much more with that insight than a standard yes or no question, which is why we do it, why we need them.
Yeah. I know that you and I had been talking um, about a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now, which is around layoffs and just the continual headlines that we see
Mhm.
with, I've heard it referred to like rolling layoffs or the forever layoff or those types of things. And so it's definitely something that employees are carrying with them at all times these days. For a company that has maybe undergone a recent layoff, would you recommend a listening program,
Yeah.
you know, in the aftermath of something like that? Is that something that you would find like that an organization would find value in?
I think in the right context, for sure. I think it's an opportunity, and I think your lens is really important on this. As you already mentioned, layoff, is can be described as a trauma, and it's not just for those that have been let go. It's for those who are remaining as well. That survivor's guilt that you can
Yeah.
feel, and you can often feel disillusioned about why you're there, or what comes next, and even about what your role looks like now, especially if what we're seeing with middle managers being cut out. Does that mean my
Right.
role changes? Does that mean it stays the same but I do more? What does it look like? And I think listening from a cultural perspective can just help reset, can help leaders
Hmm.
understand, where are our people at right now? What is it that they need from us? Because otherwise, they can just put their heads down, plow on, and say, it's a business decision, we move forward. And they fail to recognize that we don't work like that as people. We
Hmm.
have these emotions where we say, actually, if you don't look after me, I might go somewhere else. My eyes might turn towards my next opportunity because I don't feel safe anymore. And
Hmm.
next thing you know, you're losing huge amounts of the talent that you wanted to keep. Um, and listening can just help you decide where you go next, both from a comms perspective. What is it that we need to communicate? Do we need to reassure people that actually our strategy and our direction is solid? And this is the part that everyone has to play in it now. Do we actually need to look at what we stand for as a business? Has that
Yeah.
fundamentally shifted with AI coming in? We say
Yeah.
we're people first and we're human centered, but we're prioritizing machines over our heads and heart. And does that reflect what we need to do? And listening can help give you those answers. It's not going to tell you everything, but it can help point you in the right direction. But I mean, equally from your point of view, I mean, in those scenarios, what are the right things to do? How can we be more empathetic and trauma informed in our approach?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk an hour for, for an hour about this. I think, I honestly, I believe that the opportunity for trauma informed work when it comes to layoffs begins when business is good. It begins before you even get to that point where you're making that decision. The a trauma informed approach to leadership and to running a business and engaging with your people implies a level of transparency that you give people to in order to help them feel safe, in order to help them trust you. And so from where I sit, that looks like, here's how we manage our business when it's good.
Mhm.
Here's how we make decisions when business is good. And those decisions are how we go to market. Those decisions are, what segments we want to go after, but also, how we decide who gets rewarded and who gets promoted and how do you advance within the company. Having, ways that you can communicate to your employees and bring them along when times are good so that they follow the logic and they follow along and they have that trust with you, allows you then to come in and say, and here's how we're going to make decisions when things are a little bit more difficult, right?
Yeah.
And here's what we're going to prioritize, and to bring people along so that they understand the why
Mm.
in a layoff. I don't think employers spend enough time talking about the why. Instead, they'll serve up, these abstract terms, right? A reorganization for optimization and customer blah blah, and they're abstract terms. It's not something that you can touch and feel and smell, right? And
Yeah.
so the more information that you can give someone about how you make decisions, how you prioritize your business when business is good, allows you to then say, okay, we're struggling right now,
Mhm.
and this is how we're going to make some decisions right now.
Yeah.
And it sets you up to have I think a more honest conversation with people, and that reflects the dignity of everybody involved,
Yeah.
right? And so there also is that aspect of, a trauma informed layoff can look like, what does your offboarding look like? What does your outplacement look like? What do your severance packages look like? Are you helping people find their next role? Are you prioritizing finding new jobs within the company first,
Mm.
right? Like, and also sharing, kind of, hey, here's everything that we've kind of evaluated, and here's everything that we're doing to support this. I'm currently reading a lot of fascinating research on all of this, and midway through a study that is looking at what Nokia did back, I think, as the iPhone was coming into market, and they were realizing, oh my gosh, we have to really pivot our business because we're not going to be able to compete here. And so they took a really interesting approach to their layoffs. Um, the other aspect of this is the people who are still there, right? And how you manage your layoff is going to impact the morale of the people who are still working, all of the things that you mentioned, the flattening of certain roles in certain organizations, people taking on more work for the same amount of pay, all of that, I think, is something that needs to be addressed from a people centered, not business centered perspective, because that's going to impact people choosing to stay with you, right? um I want to come back to something, though, that was really interesting that you said. And I think that this is maybe something for us to just close on, because I think that this is a really, no matter what an organization is navigating right now, um, there is this sense of uncertainty. There is this sense of, like, whether that's you are impacted in the United States by, your work with the government on the things that you can and cannot say, and how you describe how you support your employees and the resources that you offer your employees, what we used to call DEI, or just more broadly, like, we don't know, like, what the future is going to hold. We don't really know what the long-term implications of AI will be for our business. Listening, you mentioned something that just kind of jumped out to me on values.
Mm.
Understanding how your values show up for your employees, if they are showing up for your employees, if there is a vacuum where you're not really maybe talking about your values enough. I think that values offer a way forward for companies to really connect with employees about everything from how they make those decisions.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's rooted in your value system, to the kinds of stories that you can tell about your business and your culture. Um, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Like how much have you seen listening kind of either surface out issues with values, or shape kind of values conversations within organizations?
I mean, values. are one of the topics we can talk about when it comes to communications. And you reference it perfectly. Then, are our values coming to life through the comms? Do you see these values coming to life through what we talk about, or how we talk about, or even how our leaders interact with us? But and again, to build on your point, you said, what we do doesn't just start through the tough times. The comms that we create, the foundations of that start through the good times. And values has a similar link. Values aren't just about when things are great. Values really show up and are really tested when things are hard. And that's when it's the real test of, can I stay true to these values, or do they fall to the side just because it's easier to do it a different way? And I think it's important. Again, everything you said, I could repeat everything you said a million times over, but uncertainty is such a problem that we don't really address through values. We talk about transparency, we talk about honesty, but when it comes to uncertainty, that's one of the things that we can't handle. And we tend to, again, referencing what you said, we tend to use these vague terms and corporate speak to kind of dust over the things that we don't necessarily want to say, or to be more elusive. And we need to be clearer. And if we can give people clarity over what's happening, when it's happening, but also why it's happening, that's what we tend to ignore. We can help people feel more safe in what they're doing, safe in where they're going. And I think that's one thing that tends to get missed when we talk about values. We talk about excellence, we talk about transparency, we talk about inclusion. But do we talk about safety? Do we talk about certainty and stability? And that's something we all need to do to be our best. And I think that's something that can tend to get lost at times.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about. There's so much that we could do, but I think it's important that anyone within comms, and it's why I love the role so much, is that we have the power to influence people's lives. We have the power to influence how people experience work. And that's a privilege. That's something that we should own. And yes, it can be tough. Yes, there can be stakeholders tweaking things till it doesn't even resemble what it first looked like. But we have an extraordinary power, and it's one that we should be proud of, because we do great work, and that always needs to be recognized, because we can often be the unsung heroes of any team, I think.
Yeah. Zac, I'm going to ask, for people who want to find you, find your work, what's your website?
The website is rocket-ex.com. And very much look forward to talking to anyone who wants to talk about comms. And equally, I mean, I know your website, Ellen. I've been there many times, but tell everyone what it is. How do they find you?
So they can find me at Equilibrious. I'm not even going to spell it, but equilibrious.com. Might need to work on that one a little bit, but I'm also at LinkedIn /internal comms. So if you just go to LinkedIn and type in internal comms, you will find me on LinkedIn, and you can connect with me there. So, well, thanks, Zac. This was super fun to chat with you, and maybe we'll do it again.
Thank you. No, appreciate your time. Speak soon.